Let me take you back to the day my entire world fell apart. It was one of those moments that leaves you feeling like someone reached inside your chest and ripped your heart right out. I remember standing in our kitchen, staring at the calendar pinned to the fridge. It wasn't just any day, it was the day everything unraveled. Sarah stood by the counter, her hands trembling as she held a piece of paper. Her face had gone pale, and when she finally looked up at me, I knew. Whatever she was about to say would change us forever. At 45 years old, I was married to Sarah Thompson, let's just call her that, who's 40. Together, we'd built what I thought was a good life. No kids, just the two of us. 12 years of marriage, filled with highs and lows, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. We met during a summer internship in Indianapolis over a decade ago. She was interning at a marketing firm, and I was working in finance. We bonded over late-night coffee runs and shared complaints about corporate culture. Back then, she had this infectious laugh that made everyone around her smile. I fell hard for her optimism, her ability to find joy even in mundane things. Over the years, though, life got heavier. Bills piled up, careers demanded sacrifices, and somewhere along the way, we stopped laughing as much. Still, I believed in us. I believed we were unbreakable. About 2 years ago, everything changed because of a routine blood test. The results showed I was at risk for diabetes, gout, and high blood pressure. That news scared the living daylights out of me, and it scared Sarah, too. So, we decided to turn things around. We started eating healthier, exercising regularly, and making better choices. At first, sticking to our new routine felt impossible. There were days when all I wanted was a greasy burger or a pint of ice cream. One particularly rough evening, I found myself sitting in the car outside a fast food joint, debating whether to give in. But then I thought about Sarah waiting at home, prepping kale salads and quinoa bowls because she believed in us. That guilt, and maybe pride, kept me driving past the drive-thru. Slowly, those little choices added up. By month 6, I'd lost 20 kilograms, and Sarah was glowing with energy. We celebrated every milestone, no matter how small, with dance parties in the living room or long hikes through the park. Our house sat nestled at the end of a cul-de-sac, surrounded by towering oak trees that turned fiery orange each autumn. Inside, the decor reflected our personalities, minimalist yet cozy, with neutral tones and splashes of color from Sarah's art projects scattered around. The kitchen was my favorite room, with its wide windows overlooking the backyard garden where we grew tomatoes and herbs. It was peaceful there, especially in the mornings when sunlight streamed in and filled the space with warmth. During those months of transformation, the kitchen became our sanctuary, a place where we worked side by side, chopping vegetables and experimenting with recipes. For a while, it felt like we were rediscovering each other, finding pieces of the connection we'd lost along the way. But looking back, I realize how naive I was. Those months of progress lulled me into a false sense of security. I believed that fixing our bodies would fix everything else, that once we conquered our physical ailments, our marriage would be stronger than ever. But what I didn't see, or refused to see, was the growing distance between us. Sure, we exercised together and cooked healthy meals side by side, but conversations became shorter, smiles less frequent. Something was shifting beneath the surface, and I was too blind to notice. In hindsight, I wonder if we placed too much emphasis on physical transformation. We believed that losing weight and eating clean would solve all our problems, as if happiness could be measured in kilograms shed or miles run. But life isn't that simple. Sometimes, no matter how much you try to fix yourself, other forces are at play, forces beyond your control. By the time we hit the 1-year mark of our health journey, I weighed 86 kilograms down from 118, and Sarah had dropped from 84 kilograms to 66. Honestly, we felt incredible. All those health problems we were worried about, they never came knocking. On paper, we were thriving. Yet, beneath the surface, cracks were forming. cracks I failed to see until it was too late. And then came that day, the day Sarah handed me the piece of paper in the kitchen. The air seemed heavier than usual, thick with unspoken words. Little did I know, this moment would mark the beginning of the end, not just of our marriage, but of the life I thought I understood so well. We got into the habit of going to the gym almost every afternoon. At first, it felt like a shared mission, a testament to our commitment to health and happiness. But that's where things started to get messy. There was this trainer there, let's call him Ryan Maxwell. You couldn't miss the guy. He had this thing where he'd check out women's backsides and flex his muscles whenever he thought anyone was looking. And Sarah? Well, once she lost the weight, men started noticing her more. She's got curves, confidence, and legs that make people do double takes. Ryan wasn't exactly immune to that. One afternoon, we were on the elliptical machines when Ryan took off his shirt and started doing crossovers near us. I gave Sarah a look, like, "Are you seeing this clown?" But instead of agreeing with me, she stared straight at him. I even caught her licking her lips. When I turned back to Ryan, he was grinning like he'd just won the lottery. That hit me hard. Sure, I'd lost weight, but I didn't look anything like him. On the way home, I made a joke about how much Ryan loved showing off. Sarah brushed it off. "I didn't even notice," she said. Then, when I mentioned how she'd been staring, she acted like she had no idea what I was talking about. "I must have been thinking about something else," she said. "Yeah, sure." After that, I couldn't help but notice they started chatting more often at the gym. Their conversations began innocently enough, workout tips, nutrition advice, but soon, they lingered longer than necessary. One day, I walked past them laughing together near the squat racks. Ryan leaned casually against the equipment, his arms crossed, showcasing his biceps. Sarah tilted her head back, laughing at something he'd said. My chest tightened, and I forced myself to keep walking, pretending not to care. The gym buzzed with energy, a cacophony of clanging weights, pounding music, and grunts of exertion. The air smelled faintly of sweat and disinfectant, mingling with the sharp tang of protein shakes. It was a place where everyone performed, not just physically, but socially. People strutted around like peacocks, trying to impress one another. Ryan fit right in, commanding attention wherever he went. Meanwhile, I felt like an outsider looking in, unsure of my role anymore. At first, Sarah dismissed my concerns about Ryan. "He's just being friendly," she'd say, rolling her eyes. But soon, I noticed other things. She started wearing tighter workout clothes, ones she hadn't worn before. Her hair was always styled perfectly, even for gym sessions. And there were days when she insisted on leaving early for the gym, saying she wanted to get extra cardio in. I couldn't prove anything, but doubt gnawed at me constantly. Ryan wasn't just muscle-bound arrogance, he had this disarming way of making people laugh. His jokes always landed perfectly, and he seemed to know exactly what to say to put others at ease. He once told me, "You're doing great, man," after spotting me during a set of deadlifts. For a second, I almost liked him. Almost. But then I caught him winking at Sarah across the weight room, and any goodwill evaporated instantly. It wasn't just anger, it was betrayal. Not because she'd done anything wrong yet, but because she didn't seem bothered by his antics. Worse still, she didn't seem bothered by my reaction either. In that moment, I felt invisible, like the years we'd spent building our lives together meant nothing compared to some stranger's flexing muscles. One evening over dinner, the tension finally boiled over. "So, Ryan tells me you used to weigh over 100 kilos, Sarah said casually. My fork froze mid-air. "Did he now?" I replied, forcing a smile. "Yeah, he said he's impressed by how far you've come." She smiled back, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. "Funny how he knows so much about me," I muttered under my breath. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked, her tone sharpening. "Nothing. Just, Seems like you two talk a lot lately." Her expression hardened. "Are you accusing me of something?" "No," I said quickly, though my voice betrayed me. "I'm just saying." "Saying what?" she snapped. "That I can't have a conversation with someone without it being suspicious?" We stared at each other across the table, the silence heavy with unspoken accusations. Insecurity is a funny thing. It creeps up on you when you least expect it, whispering doubts you thought you'd buried long ago. Was I jealous of Ryan because he was stronger, fitter, more confident? Or was it something deeper, a fear that Sarah might find him more appealing than me? Either way, it didn't matter. Once the seed of suspicion took root, it grew uncontrollably, poisoning everything it touched. A few weeks went by, and I found myself watching Ryan help Sarah during squats on the Smith machine. He put his hands on her waist, and I couldn't hold back my frustration. "I've got this," I said sharply, stepping between them. Ryan just grinned and replied, "No problem, buddy." Buddy? Really? As I stepped between Ryan and Sarah, my heart pounded like a drum. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from anger. Who did he think he was, touching her like that? And why wasn't she stopping him? For a split second, I wondered if I'd overreacted, but then Ryan smirked and said, "No problem, buddy." The word buddy dripped with mockery, like he knew exactly what buttons to push. It took every ounce of self-control not to shove him away. Sarah knows me well enough to pick up on my tone, so later that night, she called me immature and accused me of being jealous. We ended up arguing for hours until we finally decided to switch gyms. Problem solved, right? Wrong. Later that night, Sarah confronted me in the living room. Her arms were crossed, and her jaw was set, a sure sign she was ready for a fight. "You embarrassed me today," she said, her voice cold. "I embarrassed you?" I shot back. "What about him putting his hands all over you?" She rolled her eyes. "He was just helping me with form." "You're blowing this way out of proportion." Maybe she was right. Maybe I was being irrational. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that she enjoyed the attention, that she liked making me jealous. Over the next several months, Sarah started pulling away from me. She hardly spoke anymore, and when she did, it was usually just one-word answers to my texts. I brought up the idea of couples therapy, but she shot it down immediately. According to her, I was the one with trust issues. For a few weeks after switching gyms, things felt almost normal again. We worked out together at the new place, a smaller, quieter facility where no one paid us much attention. But the peace didn't last long. Sarah started skipping workouts altogether, claiming she was too busy with work or tired from late nights. When I suggested we try a morning routine instead, she shrugged it off. Maybe later, she'd say, avoiding eye contact. Each rejection stung a little more than the last. Desperate to fix things, I went to see a therapist on my own. My first session with Dr. Patel felt awkward. I sat across from her in a cozy office decorated with calming blues and greens. She asked me to describe what brought me here, so I launched into the story of Ryan and Sarah. "How does it make you feel when you see them interacting?" she asked gently. "Angry," I admitted. "Jealous. Like I'm losing her." Dr. Patel nodded thoughtfully. "And how do you think Sarah feels about your reactions?" That stopped me short. I hadn't considered her perspective beyond frustration. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe she thinks I'm crazy. Or maybe," Dr. Patel said, leaning forward slightly, "she feels trapped between wanting to reassure you and needing space to be herself. Trust is fragile. Once broken, or even doubted, it takes immense effort to rebuild." Every time Sarah brushed off my concerns, I felt like I was losing another piece of her. Yet, paradoxically, my attempts to hold on to her only pushed her further away. Dr. Patel helped me see that trust isn't just about believing someone won't hurt you, it's about giving them the freedom to choose whether they want to stay. By the time 2025 rolled around, I'd put in a lot of effort in therapy, but Sarah's behavior hadn't changed at all. Intimacy? Completely gone. Conversations? Awkward and forced, if they happened at all. I started snooping, going through her phone, checking her car for another device, even looking at her map history. Everything seemed normal. Home, work, gym, that was her routine. Whenever I tried to talk to her about it, she brushed it off, saying she was just going through some kind of midlife crisis. Without any hard evidence, I kept convincing myself that maybe I was overreacting. Evenings became unbearable. Sarah would sit on the couch scrolling through her phone, headphones in, completely tuned out. I'd try to start conversations, but they always fizzled out after a few sentences. Once, I reached over to hold her hand, something we used to do without thinking. She pulled away almost instinctively, muttering about needing to check dinner in the oven. It wasn't true, the stove was off, but she didn't care enough to explain. Late one night, when Sarah was in the shower, I unlocked her phone using the passcode I'd memorized months ago. My hands trembled as I scrolled through texts and emails, searching for anything suspicious. Nothing stood out, at least not at first glance. But then I noticed something odd: deleted messages from an unknown number. No names, no context, just gaps where conversations should have been. Was this proof of something, or just my paranoia spinning out of control? One evening, I finally confronted her about the changes in her behavior. "You keep saying it's a midlife crisis," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But what does that even mean? Are you unhappy with me? With us?" She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I don't know, okay? Maybe I'm just lost. Everyone goes through phases like this, right? Questioning their choices, wondering if they're living the life they want." Her words stung, not because they were harsh, but because they felt so distant. As if she'd already checked out emotionally, leaving behind only vague excuses. Our bed, once a place of closeness, now felt cavernous. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling while Sarah slept, or pretended to sleep, on the far edge of the mattress. The pillows smelled faintly of lavender, a scent she used to love but hadn't bought in months. Everything around us seemed frozen in time, relics of a happier past we couldn't reclaim. Dr. Patel challenged me during one session: "Do you think Sarah's behavior has changed, or are you seeing her differently now?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" Sometimes, when we focus too much on someone else's actions, we lose sight of our own perceptions. Has your view of Sarah shifted since Ryan entered the picture? Or has she truly become someone different? I left that day feeling unsettled. Had I created a version of Sarah in my mind, one that didn't align with reality? Or had she really changed? Trust is complicated. It's not just about believing someone won't hurt you, it's about accepting uncertainty. Every time I found nothing incriminating in Sarah's phone or car, I told myself to let go of my suspicions. But doubt lingered, gnawing at me like a splinter buried deep beneath the skin. Therapy helped me see that perhaps the real issue wasn't whether Sarah was hiding something, it was why I couldn't stop looking for answers. Then came the moment that hit me like a ton of bricks. One day, Mr. P, the friendly security guard at our condo, casually mentioned that a masseur had come to see Sarah the day before. "Do you have any video footage?" I asked, trying my best to stay calm. Sure enough, when I looked at the recording, it was Ryan. Turns out, he'd been sneaking into our building pretending to give Sarah massages. When Mr. P mentioned the masseur, my chest tightened like a vice. My hands clenched into fists, nails digging into my palms. "Do you have any video footage?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Watching the recording felt surreal, like staring at a nightmare unfolding in slow motion. There he was, Ryan, strolling confidently into our building as if he belonged there. Every step he took felt like another blow to my gut. By the time the clip ended, I could barely breathe. I borrowed a coworker's car and followed her to the mall where the gym was located. There was Ryan, waiting for her like clockwork. They laughed, hugged, and even kissed like they were a couple madly in love. My heart shattered as I watched them from a distance. I trailed them to a nearby neighborhood but couldn't get close enough without risking being noticed. Later, I figured out why the location didn't show up on her map. It belonged to Derek Collins, the gym owner, who had inherited the place from his late father. I parked the borrowed car across the street from the gym entrance, heart pounding so loudly I worried someone might hear it. When Sarah emerged, Ryan was already waiting for her. He greeted her with a grin, pulling her into a hug that lasted just a second too long. They laughed about something, his hand lingering on her back that I wanted to scream, to storm over and confront them right then and there. But I forced myself to stay still, knowing I needed proof before acting. As I sat in the borrowed car, guilt gnawed at me. Was I becoming the kind of person who spies on their spouse? Who invades privacy and stalks loved ones? Yet, every time I considered stopping, doubt crept back in. If I didn't find answers now, would I ever know the truth? The line between protecting myself and violating Sarah's autonomy blurred until I couldn't tell which side I stood on anymore. The borrowed car smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and cheap air freshener, a stark contrast to the clean scent of my own vehicle. Sitting behind the wheel felt wrong, like wearing someone else's clothes. In that moment, I realized how far I'd strayed from the person I used to be. Once grounded in honesty and trust, I now found myself hiding, lying, and sneaking around, all in pursuit of answers I wasn't sure I was ready to face. That evening, I confronted Sarah, pretending I had caught the flu so I could avoid any physical contact. While she believed I was sick, I set everything up to gather proof. Using my laptop, I remotely accessed her phone and found coded messages between her and Ryan. They were disguised as work-related conversations, but it didn't take long for me to piece everything together. With support from my family, I came up with a plan to catch them in the act. As I sat at my laptop decoding their messages, my hands trembled so badly I could barely type. Each word felt like a dagger piercing deeper into my heart. They weren't just casual exchanges, they were intimate, filled with plans and promises that excluded me entirely. I forced myself to keep reading, knowing I needed every piece of proof before I could act. I used a remote access app I'd installed months ago under the guise of keeping track of important documents. It felt invasive now, like violating her privacy in ways I never imagined possible. As I scrolled through her texts, I noticed patterns, phrases like client meeting and after-hours session that didn't match her actual schedule. When I cross-referenced timestamps with gym records, the truth became undeniable. Every coded message pointed to one thing: betrayal. When I told my sister about what I'd uncovered, she gasped so loudly I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yes," I replied, choking back tears. "I don't know what to do." She paused, then said firmly, "You need proof. Something concrete. And once you have it, you decide your next move, but don't let anger cloud your judgment." Her words stuck with me, grounding me in logic even as emotions threatened to overwhelm me. I told Sarah I had tested positive for some kind of bug and needed to stay with my parents for a while. She seemed more than happy to get rid of me, so eager, in fact, that she packed my bags herself. Within a few hours, I quietly snuck back home. That's when I found them together in our bed. I started recording everything on my phone, then burst into the room and caught them red-handed. The house was eerily quiet as I crept upstairs, phone in hand. The door to our bedroom creaked slightly as I pushed it open, revealing a scene that made my blood run cold. There they were, tangled in our sheets, oblivious to everything except each other. For a moment, I froze, unable to process what I was seeing. Then, adrenaline kicked in. I hit record on my phone and stepped inside, slamming the door shut behind me. "What the hell is going on here?" I shouted, my voice shaking with rage. Sarah bolted upright, clutching the blanket to her chest. Her eyes widened in shock, then narrowed defensively. "How dare you barge in like this?" she snapped, as if she were the wronged party. Ryan scrambled to cover himself, his smug grin replaced by panic. "Man, it's not what it looks like," he stammered, though his words rang hollow. Standing there, watching them scramble to explain themselves, I realized something. The betrayal wasn't just about infidelity, it was about losing myself in the process. Over the past months, I'd become consumed by suspicion and paranoia, sacrificing pieces of who I was in pursuit of answers. Now, faced with undeniable proof, I felt hollow. Who was I without the life I'd built with Sarah? Was there anything left worth salvaging? As Ryan shouted at me to leave, something inside me snapped. My vision blurred with rage, and before I could think, my fist connected with his throat. He stumbled backward, clutching his neck, gasping for air like a fish out of water. For a split second, guilt flickered through me. What had I just done? Sarah was trembling, her face filled with shame, and she begged me to forgive her. But I knew better than to fall for that. My lawyer looked over all the evidence I'd gathered and confirmed it would hold up in court. Not long after, I served her with divorce papers. Sarah stood frozen in place as I dragged Ryan toward the door, his feet scraping against the hardwood floor. "Please stop," she whispered, her voice barely audible over Ryan's wheezing. But when I turned to look at her, her eyes weren't pleading, they were calculating, weighing her options. It hit me then, she wasn't afraid of losing me, she was afraid of being exposed, of facing the consequences of her actions. I sat across from my lawyer, Ms. Carter, in her sleek office, sliding a folder filled with screenshots, recordings, and timestamps across her desk. She reviewed everything methodically, nodding occasionally as she scribbled notes. "This is solid," she said finally, looking up at me. "With this kind of documentation, we have a strong case not only for divorce but also for ensuring you retain control of shared assets." Her words brought a strange mix of relief and emptiness. Winning legally didn't erase the pain, I'd still lost the life I'd built. In the days that followed, I leaned heavily on my family for support. I blocked Sarah's number and started the long process of rebuilding my life. I stopped going to our old gym and found new places to work out. I took down all her pictures from around the house and even put the place up for rent. It was full of memories I didn't want to carry anymore. Each picture I took down felt like peeling away a layer of my past. There was one of Sarah and me at the beach, her hair blowing in the wind, both of us laughing like nothing could ever touch us. For a moment, I hesitated, my fingers trembling on the frame. Was I erasing her, or preserving myself? In the end, I placed it face down in a box, unable to look at it any longer. The house itself seemed suffocating, its walls echoing with arguments and silences that had once defined us. Putting it up for rent wasn't just practical, it was necessary. Every corner held a memory, every room a ghost I couldn't escape. But here's the thing that really blew my mind. Thanks to Derek Collins, I found out Ryan had a plan to trap Sarah into marriage by getting her pregnant. Karma sure has a twisted sense of humor, doesn't it? When I ran into Ryan at the gym again, I made sure he knew exactly what was coming his way: legal trouble, the end of his career, and a whole lot of regret for the rest of his life. The new gym was smaller, quieter, and completely devoid of drama. I started attending yoga classes, something I'd never considered before. At first, the stretches felt awkward, my body resistant to change. But over time, I began to notice a shift, not just physically, but mentally. Each breath became a reminder that I was still here, still capable of starting over. The instructor often talked about mindfulness, about letting go of things outside your control. Those words resonated deeply, though I wasn't ready to fully embrace them yet. When I saw Ryan across the weight room, my pulse quickened. He looked different now, less confident, almost skittish. As I approached him, his eyes widened in recognition. "You don't want to do this," he muttered, backing away. "Oh, I think I do," I replied, my voice steady. You messed with the wrong person. Your career is over, Ryan. And trust me, karma doesn't forget. His face paled, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. It wasn't vindictive, it was empowering. For months, I'd carried the weight of betrayal, anger, and shame. Now, standing there, I realized I no longer needed to shoulder it alone. Karma may have had its way with Ryan, but it didn't fill the void inside me. Watching him unravel under legal pressure brought some satisfaction, sure. But it also made me realize something important. Justice isn't about making someone else suffer, it's about finding peace within yourself. And that's a battle I'm still fighting. The process of moving on hasn't been easy. Some nights, I lie awake replaying every moment, the arguments, the lies, the final confrontation. Other nights, I dream of a future where none of it happened, where Sarah and I remain the couple we used to be. But those dreams are fading, replaced by a quiet determination to rebuild. I've started journaling, writing letters I'll never send to Sarah, Ryan, and even myself. Each word feels like another step toward healing, another brick laid in the foundation of a new life. Now, as I sit here writing this update, I feel like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. Healing isn't something that happens overnight, but I'm ready to keep moving forward. Life doesn't stop, and neither will I. Healing isn't linear. Some days, I wake up feeling like I've turned a corner, only to find myself revisiting old wounds by mid-afternoon. But there are moments, tiny, almost imperceptible ones, that remind me I'm moving forward. Like the first time I laughed without guilt, or the day I walked past our old house and felt nothing but indifference. These milestones may seem insignificant to others, but to me, they're proof that life continues, even after loss. A few weeks ago, I received an email from someone claiming to be Sarah's therapist. At first, I dismissed it as spam, but curiosity got the better of me. Attached was a letter Sarah had written during one of her sessions, a raw, unfiltered account of her side of the story. Reading it shattered everything I thought I knew. She hadn't been callous or indifferent, she'd been trapped, coerced by Ryan into believing she had no other choice. Her betrayal wasn't born of malice, it was born of fear. In the letter, she described how Ryan had manipulated her, convincing her that I would never understand her struggles, that he was the only one who truly cared. He painted himself as her savior, preying on her insecurities until she believed she couldn't leave him without consequences. The pregnancy plan wasn't just about trapping her, it was about isolating her completely, ensuring she had no one else to turn to. As I read her words, anger gave way to sorrow. Not for her betrayal, but for the pain she endured in silence. I've started volunteering at a local community center, teaching fitness classes to kids who might not otherwise have access to structured exercise. It's ironic, given how much the gym once defined my life, and nearly destroyed it, but helping others has become my anchor. Each session reminds me that strength isn't just physical, it's resilience, adaptability, and hope rolled into one. One boy, Marcus, stands out in particular. He's shy, hesitant to join in at first, but when he finally does, his smile lights up the room. Watching him grow stronger week by week gives me purpose, a reason to keep showing up. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that people aren't always who they seem. Ryan wasn't just a predator, he was a symptom of something larger, a reminder that trust must be earned, not assumed. And Sarah, well, she wasn't perfect, but neither was I. Love demands vulnerability, yes, but it also requires boundaries. Moving forward, I won't settle for anything less than mutual respect. Yesterday, I went through the last box of belongings from the house. Inside, I found a journal I'd forgotten, a record of our early years together, filled with dreams we never fulfilled. Instead of throwing it away, I placed it on a shelf in my new apartment, a reminder of where I came from and how far I've come. Life doesn't stop, and neither will I. As I close this chapter of my life, I realize that endings are rarely tidy. They're messy, complicated, and often painful. But they're also opportunities, for growth, for forgiveness, for reinvention. I don't know what the future holds, and maybe that's okay. What I do know is that I'm stronger now than I was before. Stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace whatever comes next. Betrayal taught me that love isn't enough, not without trust, communication, and mutual respect. Justice taught me that revenge doesn't heal wounds, it merely masks them. And forgiveness, though difficult, taught me that letting go isn't about forgetting, it's about choosing to live beyond the pain. Life doesn't stop, and neither will I.